Joining me now is New York Times Chief White House correspondent Peter Baker. So, Peter, let's begin with Obamacare. The Congressional Budget Office is expected to release its review of the Republican legislation to replace it on Monday. Secretary Tom Price is pointing to errors the CBO has made in the past. Is this early damage control, you think, ahead of what could be potentially a negative review of the plan?
Yeah, look, we've seen with President Trump for quite a while that when organizations put out information that he doesn't like, that doesn't fit his needs or interests, he then questions the very legitimacy of it. He calls it fake. You saw that this week with the jobs report. You know, last year when the jobs reports were coming out good for President Obama, he said it was fake and rigged. When it came out this month good for him, he said it was a great thing. So I would expect that if the CBO comes out with numbers that show people losing coverage and the cost to taxpayers being very high, you'll see some efforts to discredit it and say that it's not a reliable report. But in fact, what you have now, of course, is it puts other Republicans in a bad position because they have relied on it in the past, and they're going to need some sort of independent way of saying, what does this bill actually accomplish or not accomplish?
So it's been fascinating to watch, Peter, the reaction from some Republicans to this. Senator Rand Paul called it Obamacare light, said the measure is dead on arrival. How challenging is this going to be for House Speaker Paul Ryan and President Trump to get that Republican support that they need?
Yeah, it's interesting. Right now, they're only negotiating among themselves. As you pointed out earlier, there's no Democrat involved in this conversation. It's entirely a Republican on Republican negotiation and fight. And the conservatives, the Freedom Caucus in the House of Representatives doesn't like this bill. It doesn't think it goes far enough. It thinks it's basically just tweaking what President Obama put in place. And, you know, it won't take that many of them to defect in order to cause a real problem for Speaker Ryan getting it through the House. Now, it's easier for a speaker to get a bill through the House than through the Senate. So let's say he does get it through the House. That's where things get really interesting in the Senate, because not only do you have Senator Rand Paul and some other conservatives like Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, and some others questioning this bill. Obviously, you have Democrats pretty uniformly against it, and it's much easier in the Senate to gum up the works. So it's a big, long road of challenges and obstacles ahead of a president who hasn't done this before, and a speaker who's never worked with this president before.
Let me turn to another issue. The House Intelligence Committee asked the Trump administration to provide evidence to support the president's claim that President Obama tapped Trump Tower. How do you see the White House responding to this request?
Well, you know, at the moment, we don't know of any evidence of this, and that's why this request is important. You know, this is an easy investigation, actually. It actually could be solved in 5 minutes. The President of the United States can pick up the phone, call the FBI director, call the Attorney General, call the Director of National Intelligence and say, is there a warrant, a FISA warrant, a secret foreign surveillance court warrant on me or not? I mean, this is an answerable question. But so far, he hasn't chosen to do so. And he's left it to this congressional process that could end up dragging on for quite a long time until we get a definitive answer to the question. You know, at this point, it's one of these things where, as Speaker Ryan told John Dickerson on Face the Nation, there is no known evidence of it that anybody in these important positions has heard about. And so we're going to see whether it actually leads anywhere in what the president does, if in fact it turns out there isn't something to back up what he said.
On another issue, U.S. Attorney Bharara said he was fired Saturday, despite claiming the president had told him he would remain on the job back in November. What do you make of the apparent reversal?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, there's some conversation that, you know, President-elect Trump made that promise, or at least raised that idea with Bharara that he would stay last fall when he was trying to court Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democratic minority leader who's pretty close to the U.S. attorney. Well, things have soured since then between the president and Senator Schumer. They may not feel any need to court him anymore. But of course, look, every president gets to replace the U.S. attorneys. That's the prerogative of the president. President Clinton did it. Other presidents did it. It's, you know, it is the prerogative. What's made it odd here is there had been this conversation about this particular U.S. attorney staying, and suddenly that decision was reversed.
Finally, Peter, this past week, President Trump spoke with Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority on Friday for the first time since taking office. You've covered this story extensively, and you wrote this recently, quote, Mr. Trump has embarked on what he promises to be a sustained effort to break a generations-old impasse and resolve the conflict. What's your assessment, Peter, of how the president has approached the Middle East so far?
Yeah, it's very interesting, of course. Look, this is a president who loves a good deal, right? And what's the biggest thing you can negotiate in foreign policy at this point? Well, to end a conflict that no other president has been able to end for literally generations. So he's very intrigued by this, and he seems to be taking it seriously. He's sending his negotiator, Jason Greenblatt, to the region in the next few days. He'll meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. He'll meet with President Abbas of the Palestinian side. And, President Trump has sort of backed off some of the very provocative positions he had taken on the pro-Israeli side in order to try to give this negotiation a chance. He's not moved the embassy yet to Jerusalem, which would be very provocative to the Arab world. He has, in fact, asked Prime Minister Netanyahu to kind of hold off on some of the settlement construction. So he does seem to be laying the ground for a serious negotiation. Whether he can get there or not, that's a bigger question.
All right, Peter Baker, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Great to see you. Thanks.